GM.
GM. So, should you panic? Is it all over?
Sell, sell, sell.
No. It's the usual. Market gets a bit excited on the weekends. Alts run a little bit harder. Bitcoin takes over and flushes. So we're seeing Bitcoin dominance increasing. We're seeing alts weaken off. Some very significant dips. So at this time, you need to keep perspective, right? So, first thing is we're still a few weeks away from the ETF. So no reason to suspect a massive nuke before then. Positive flows should come in and support price. Secondly, with the options, the big options expiry that's coming on the end of the month. So if you go to Deribit options expiry, you go to the 29th, end of the year. Massive, the biggest wall of open interest is at 40k, and then 45 as the second biggest, and so that is likely to act as support as big players defend their positions, their 40k calls going into the end of the year. And if we get to 45, it's likely to act as resistance for the same reason. So, nothing has changed from that perspective. 40k should act as support. And I think we're going to do something like this, where we hold going into the end of the year. We get down into the 200 EMA on the 4 hour finally, right, which we haven't even tested yet. This is still a very strong trend. First touch of that 200, that we have not been there since 16th of October. The first tap of that is going to have plenty of liquidity. Plus, it's sitting at 40k. So you have a 40k round number tap. You have these lows getting swept potentially, if they get swept. And you have the 200 EMA on the 4 hour. Look at how the 100 EMA performed on the way up, held us a support in that trend before a push up. I'd expect the 200 to do something similar, at least on the first touch. And so what I'm expecting is some chop. Now I'm not trading it this way, I'm just long spot, and I've said, guys, be long spot. Do not panic and close at 41 or 40 or whatever, because eventually we're going to go higher and you're going to regret it. Now, I actually think this might not even get taken out. I think the bottom could be in, and we just chop and chop and chop, and people keep trying to force it down, and it doesn't go. But, of course, that doesn't mean get long here and put your stop loss below the red. Because wicks to here, like I said, wicks into there are a gift. And I think we can easily wick down into that level. And if we do, touch down into the 200, then expect a little bit of chop around it. Okay? So if you look at the 200 EMA as being there, I'll just change the color of this so it's more easy to see. Then if we push down into it, expect something like that, where it'll tap it, right? Because Bitcoin tends to form a bottom with multiple touches. So that'd be what I'm expecting, just anything down into there. And then for that to hold, and we start to climb back up, going into the end of the year, here's the options expiry, so we'll not be at 40 or 45, probably somewhere in the middle. And then away we go to start the new year strong. That's my expectation. That's just one path. Price can take many paths. But a lot of people who are calling tops here are doing so prematurely when we haven't even lost the 4 hour trend. Now, what would constitute 4 hour trend getting lost would be some significant weakness in these bands, right? And even then, it's not time to exit. You never exit at the lows of a particular consolidation, right? It's bad from a trading perspective, and even if you want to take profit on your bags, you have to allow more weakness to form. You have to be okay with volatility. You have to allow more weakness to form, then wait for a bounce, which is, it always comes. It doesn't mean it's going to new highs. And then what you'll actually notice is alts start to run. Because if Bitcoin weakens more, you might see it as weakness, but it's actually profit taking. And those profits will roll into alts, because that's how it goes. Alts pump last. Now, we've already seen alts pumping a little bit. But as a whole, they haven't. So, as a whole, alts just formed a big consolidation up here. Much the same. The 200 EMA, which hasn't been tested yet on alts, is down below us, right? Hasn't been touched once since the 19th of October. So again, alts can sell off into a trap. And at that point, if Bitcoin doesn't go to new highs, I'd expect alts to. And that would be your clearest bearish sign, right? If Bitcoin, say, just runs up to a lower high, or maybe just sweeps its highs, but alts go much higher, going into the new year, yeah, absolutely. I'd expect Bitcoin to tail off then, maybe have a pump when the ETF gets approved, but that's it. Who knows? No point trying to like predict too far into the future. But as long as the trend is holding, the trend is your friend. Okay? And don't be surprised if it's really shitty and grinding like this, because this is often how it goes. Bleeds and bleeds and bleeds, and then away it goes. This part here would take us all the way to the weekend, and it would look and feel like total shit. And then of course, everyone gets peak bearish. Christmas is ruined, as we're down here. Christmas Day is ruined. Everyone tells their family, I'm sorry for telling you to buy all those crypto coins that are now down 15%, right? To be 10% on the total, but 15 or 20% on the alts. Sorry, Granny, your retirement money is gone. And then of course, once Granny capitulates on Boxing Day, we pump to the moon. So obviously, being slightly facetious, but wouldn't be surprised. We're going into the last week of the year. I don't know what the stock market opening hours are this week, but I don't think we have a full week. I'm pretty sure. Uh, 2023. So obviously it's closed on New Year's Day, closed on Christmas Day, and is that it? That's all? Okay. So we're open this week, all week. Open for business. And then Monday, we closed. Tuesday open, Wednesday open, Thursday open. Then Friday's the big crypto options expiry. Data as well. Been looking here this morning. We've cooled off nicely. If you see here, for the global funding rate, open interest, and what else do I want to look at? I want to look at just Bitcoin's funding. So here's Bitcoin's OI, here's the altcoin OI, here's the Bitcoin funding, or the altcoin funding, and then here's the Bitcoin funding, which is OI weighted. So we'll move that up. So Bitcoin on top, alts on bottom. And we've, again, coming back to reasonable levels on alts. Definitely room for a little, maybe not that crazy, but definitely room for a little leverage flush into there, right? We've still got to build up. And, you know, another, if the total 3 grinds down a bit more, some alts will drop 10%. But most of them have already had pretty significant sell-offs. And I think the next few days more likely to be grinding down than anything. If you look at the altcoin funding rate down here, it's below neutral. We've had a reset. The great reset. There we are, below neutral. Have been now all morning. 0.086, you see on the right. 0.01 is neutral, so we're below that. Bitcoin actually still has higher funding. I'd like to see that come down a little bit. Seems a little bit like when you look at the aggregate opening, Bitcoin's OI is rising slightly here, whereas alts are staying flat. That's good. It's better that alts are weaker. But of course, with this Bitcoin, it's very, very minor. However, there's about 250 million, which isn't nothing. of OI that's opened up here this morning, which is probably trying to support Bitcoin, right? Someone's trying to support price above 40k, trying to probably protect these lows. Maybe they've got a stop or a liquidation or whatever, or just trying to stop, just the plunge protection team as they're known, just trying to stop the price from collapsing in the short term. So I don't know if the absolute bottom's in for Bitcoin yet. I'd like to see funding come down a bit, but it's still not at crazy levels. I'd like to see it get back to this more neutral and spend a few days there. See here, like we had a nice week or almost 2 weeks of funding basically hovering around neutral as Bitcoin's price remains steady. I'd like to see something similar. We've gotten the crazy leverage out, right? Now if we can see a consistent period through Christmas where funding stays up, chops above and below neutral, OI declines off a little bit more, price just goes sideways into the EMAs like I showed. If you look at Bitcoin, and price just chops around at this 200 EMA, then all is good. When you zoom out as well though and look at the global, the OI of BTC as well as the global OI, so I'll not look at the funding rates here. We'll look at the open interest on Bitcoin and on alts. We definitely went over and above anything that we had done this year. So you see those lines? They extend back to 2022 when we last had this level of open interest. Right, and if you do it, there we go. When we reached this peak here on alts, that was the top for alts in terms of OI. Bitcoin topped out with So, last video got cut off, but I was looking at Coinalyze and just showing that the global open interest, the global funding rates, they're coming down, which is good. Definitely still a little bit of room for a further flush, but on alts I wouldn't expect it to be much more than just a deep wick. If you're long spot, you're fine. A lot of things are going to be selling off here. A lot of altcoins will struggle and they will lag and they will go lower. But if you have strong positions that are above their trends, then everything is fine. So here's the first path. And as long as price respects this 200 on the 4 hour, which is the turquoise line, then we are in a 4 hour uptrend, which is still a very low time frame, fast moving uptrend. So if the 4 hour trend hasn't broke, it's not over, right? But what you need to watch out for this week and next week is time. Trends require resets that happen over short time frames. So like we had here, even though we spent several weeks chopping, we were actually chopping upwards, right? And we never went below the 100 EMA, and the 50 never crossed the 100, and the 200 stayed intact all the way. Now, the 50 and the 100 are weakening, but we're moving down into the 200, which is where the most likely next level of support comes. It's also at the round number of 40k. If that holds, and we chop through this week and start to move up towards the end of the month, we'll make new highs. I'm sure of it, but doesn't mean that's going to happen. We could also see something like this. So here would be my bearish scenario, which is first of all losing, I'll take this off for a second, it's losing the 200 EMA, which is here. So we'll probably bounce off it first time, but if we then come up, go down below it, and you start to see price trading below that 200, and the 100's coming in and the 50's crossing over, and they're all starting to cross over each other, that's when you see trend weakness. And that's when, not here, because when we dip down into this old support, we'll get a bounce, but that's where you want to de-risk or take profit on the next bounce, because it's most likely to just be a squeeze before price actually grinds lower into next year. I still think first option is more likely. ETFs are still coming, funding rates are already cooling off, the market's getting flushed out a little bit already, so I think that there's plenty of juice for us to go higher, but we might not. And then even if this does go lower, this is the 50-day EMA, right? The 50-day EMA, which hasn't been touched, never mind the 100 or the 200, those are all massive liquidity areas. That 50-day EMA, if we did come back down here, will produce at least a move to there, if not maybe new highs. But I personally, since we follow the 4-hour trend all the way here, with the 100, 50, 100, 200, I would personally de-risk once Bitcoin loses its 4-hour trend. Yeah? Because the daily trend won't break until the run is already over. That's the way it goes. So if you see something like this, it's a good sign, or a clear sign. I wouldn't say it's necessarily good. Clear sign to de-risk. Now, if you look at the daily, if I hide just the drawings, and we go out to a daily perspective, we're still holding the daily 1221. As bad as it looks, as bearish as it looks, it's still holding. We haven't even touched the 50, the 100, or the 200. Now, if we drop down into the 50, depending on how long it takes to get there, almost certainly we will get a reaction because there's a lot of liquidity there. It's a trend following band, and the daily trend's still intact at that point, especially if we don't go below 38. Then the daily trend, which has this swing low here, is still intact. That could easily produce new highs, but also if the 4 hours weak, maybe your 6 hour, your 8 hour, your lower time frame trends, if they are weakening, meaning the 100, the 50 is crossing the 100, is crossing the 200 in a bearish sense, right? You want 50 above 100, above 200. If you start to see the 50 below the 100, or you start to see, all of them, 100 below the 200, and the 200 on top, that's obviously bearish. So your lower time frames build into your higher time frames. You don't have to wait for confirmed 200 EMA over 100 over 50, because by then it's definitely over. Just look at any previous trends, significant trends where we've had 50 above 100 above 200. Even over here back in April, we sold off into the 50. What did it do? It held. Where did it push us? Just into a lower high. So that's what I'm talking about. If we see more extreme weakness, it will be de-risk on that bounce. That's more likely to be a lower high. Yeah? Don't hang on and hope maybe we go higher. If you're planning now, if your plan is I want to de-risk in the next bounce, if I see this, then do it. But you can see that both the 100 and the 200, they all held, and even the 200 led us to new highs. Right? But that's after a 60-day correction that went down 20%. So when you're looking at all these, Bitcoin is in a strong daily uptrend and will continue to be for several months from here. But it doesn't mean if you're holding spot, totally fine. I'm fully exposed spot with Bitcoin. I'm not selling any. But to go to the 200, it can probably go down 25%, right? By the time that 200 EMA catches up and Bitcoin sells off, you can be significantly off the highs when that happens. But those levels are where you're expecting to see some kind of reaction. Let's imagine we chop around into the ETF, then we sell off down into that 100. Well, that's going to produce a big move. Now, maybe it just takes the highs, and that's all we get. But if you're patient, you don't panic, you allow everyone else to panic here at these levels, you'll get some kind of reaction, especially if it's just sold off straight down. You get some kind of rally reaction, and if you want to de-risk, you can do so after. I am firmly of the belief that the time to de-risk is after the ETF, not before it. Meaning, we are going to have support under the market until the end of the month because of the options, the big options open interest at 40 and a 45. We've got the ETF coming, and of course, after the ETF, there's probably going to be a sell-off, right? But your job is not to predict when the top will come. If you go and look here, this was the ETF in 2021. That was the day. What do? Big sell-off, right? That was probably a 20%, 15% sell-off. But then what happened? We consolidated, chopped, and we bounced. You don't have to wait for the sweep, but you can certainly wait for, allow everyone to panic first and sell. This time we just come into the 1221s, move back up, and you get another chance to get out, right? This is also a good example here of how we never even touched the 50, right? This all was on the 1221s. So it doesn't mean that just because Bitcoin's holding that trend that the trend continues forever. But remember what I've said last week, and I keep saying it, narrative. The time to take profit or de-risk or expect the top, a local top, is once the narrative is over, meaning the ETF, and we move on to another narrative. That's what's important. Not price, it's narrative. Narrative and time are what matters. So if Bitcoin continues to hold the daily EMAs here, and we haven't had the ETF yet, I expect higher prices. If we go past the ETF and Bitcoin is holding the 1221, I'll be watching for any weakness, because once the narrative is done, that's where the door opens for potential deeper sell-offs and more of a correction. So, a couple of paths there, bullish and a bearish, but in either case, selling around 40k, you're just selling support. You're selling into support. Maybe we go to 39, 38, sure, but even if we go to the 50, even if we go to 38.5, we're going to get a big reaction probably to 43, and even if we're bearish, a lower high to 43 will give you a better opportunity to de-risk. So that's how I'm playing it. GM.